Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury.
Well, Thursday evening, third podcast in 5 days. Simon, I'm guessing you're going to be asking for overtime if we do any more, and our final husting of the 2022 season.
It is. Despite our best attempts at trying to schedule more in to make it even more of a tighter squeeze, this is indeed our last hustings of this year. So we have with us the candidates, so 4 candidates for Nelson Ward. So we are joined tonight by Jason Fazackarley from the Liberal Democrats, Aimee Gwyther from Labour, Spencer Gardner from the Conservatives, and Duncan Robinson from the Greens. Good evening, candidates.
Evening.
Evening.
Hi.
Any we missed out on?
As normal, we sent out invitations to any candidates that we could find contacts for on social media or any other way at all, and any that are attached to any political parties. We also reached out to political parties. We haven't had any responses from anybody else, but basically the door was open there. And also we kind of shouted out ourselves on social media to say, hey, we'd like to do these things. If you're interested, please give us a shout. But luckily we have four of the candidates here this evening, ready to answer our questions, so that their voters can hear what they've got to say.
So for those that haven't heard before, Simon, do you just want to talk us through the rules and then we'll dive in?
Okay, so our rules are relatively simple, in that each of the candidates, we conducted a coin toss before the show went live. So they will conduct an up to 2-minute opening speech at the start of the show. Then we have some questions to go through that we will then put to each of the candidates in a particular order. Don't know where that noise is coming from. I'm just gonna. I think we've identified that. So sorry. So after the opening speeches, each of our candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question, and then when all of the candidates have answered each question, they'll then have an option to use an up to 60-second rebuttal if there's anything that they need to come back on of one of the responses from one of the other candidates. And then we'll move on to the next question. Once we've got through all of our questions, then all of the candidates will have an up to 60-second closing speech that they can use, and then that's our hustings. There we are.
Marvellous.
A simple rule.
Thank you, Simon. So without any further ado, if we can go into the opening addresses, and can I invite Aimee for you to step up first, please?
Hi, yeah, thank you. My name's Aimee Gwyther, and I'm standing in Nelson. The reason that I decided to stand is because I was working in the area at the time, so already had familiarity with it, and I was working in social care, so I had some awareness of some of the issues facing people in the area. And I grew up somewhere that is very similar to Buckland and then some of the nearer areas, Stamshore and North End. And I just felt like when I started speaking to people on the doorsteps, which I actually started back in about December, going out and canvassing, but I was doing it in different wards to support my colleagues. I was hearing similar kinds of problems coming up that I recognised to ones that I'd had. And then as a youngster and growing up in the area that I did in London. And then I found that from around about mid to late February, I started canvassing regularly and talking to people through Buckland and heading up the ward. And I just thought, actually, this really is the right place for me to be. People were talking about problems going on in their neighbourhoods, concerns that they had with things that didn't seem to be being resolved. And also they would express things that were going really well already, like with that the council were doing. And I just feel that my kind of background experience working in mental health, education and social care means that I spent 20 years working kind of at ground level with people in their communities, and communities very much like the Nelson one, which is quite varied. And I think I'd be able to relate to people really well. I've taken literally tens, if not hundreds of hours over the last few months trying to talk to as many people as possible. And I think have the empathy to try and tap into what it is people need and to bring them together. And I also tend to think quite long term and not an immediate make something pretty kind of person. If there's a problem, I want to look long term, what that's going to look like in 20 or 30 years.
Thank you, Aimee. And so, Spencer, could I invite you to make your opening address, please?
Thank you, Simon and Ian. Good evening, everybody. My name is Spencer Gardner. I live and work in Portsmouth, and I'm a solicitor. I started campaigning in the ward in 2019 to support Penny Mordaunt MP. During that time, I've been actively involved in lots of community matters, dealing with littering and fly tipping and getting areas cleared in response to residents' complaints, assisting residents in Wilson Road with long-term flooding issues and dealing with Southern Water on their behalf, tackling antisocial behaviour issues across the ward, and I'm currently involved with Hampshire Police following up on a number of reports about drug dealing hotspots within the ward, and have been working with community wardens regarding antisocial behaviour. I've been busy, along with other Conservative colleagues, actively opposing bad HMO developments, which I know we will be visiting in further detail later on. And I've been dealing with lots of residents' queries, already dealing with a range of housing and benefits related issues. As the representative for Nelson Ward, I would be active and visible across the ward and in close contact with local residents, looking to help them where I can with their issues.
Perfect. Thank you, Spencer. And can I invite Jason? I don't think we've acknowledged the fact that you are the current sitting councillor. Could I invite you to make your opening address, please?
Yeah, and again, an apology for any background noise, but there is a printer in the background. Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. I've been fortunate enough to represent Nelson now for 23 years out of the last 27. I was first elected back in 1995 and then lost to UKIP in 2014. It's a varied role being a councillor. There's a lot to it. People just tend to think you go to meetings and such like, but obviously the bread and butter of what you do is to represent residents within your ward. A lot's changed since 95 in regards to the council, but in regard to the issues that affect local people, they're very much the same. Fly tipping, housing needs, antisocial behaviour, dog fouling, you know, run of the mill stuff that we tend to see across the city or whichever ward that you're in. As I say, I've been represented for Nelson for 23 years. I think I'm fairly familiar with the way that local authorities operate, where you need to turn to if a resident brings an issue to you. So, you know, that's what we do as councillors. We're there to represent the people, so that's exactly what we should be doing. I've enjoyed it. It's had its ups and downs over the 20 odd years, but you know, it's a role I appreciate to do. I'd like to continue doing it, so hence the reason why I'm standing again this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. And last, by no means least, can I invite Duncan? Can you make your opening address, please?
Hi, good evening. My name is Duncan Robinson. I have been a Portsmouth resident since 2007, when I first moved here with the Royal Navy. When I left the Navy, I started working in schools and have seen so many issues around so many things. Why green? Because we want to build a better community for Portsmouth as a whole. I want to see a better future for my two young children. And I've spoken to other parents, about issues they seem to have regarding many different things, including pretty much everything everybody's mentioned so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. So we'll now go into our questions, and Simon, will you lead us in?
Okay, so our first question is we're asking each of our candidates to tell us why they are standing in Nelson. And that question first goes to Jason, please.
Okay, I kind of covered that really in my open introduction to you. It's. I mean, I was born in Portsmouth too. I've lived here all my life, apart from a couple of stints when I've been away through forces and such like. But it's a massive city. In geographical terms, it's obviously very small, being 5 miles from top to bottom. But there's a lot going on in the city, and there's a lot we need to do to tackle the issues that we've got. And it's not an easy task. There are so many things that affect people's daily lives. I think being a councillor gives certainly me and my colleagues the opportunity to progress that further. I think, difficulties people face, you get exasperated calls from residents saying, I can't get through to the council, lack of response and such like. That shouldn't be the case, but clearly that happens. And the ability as a councillor, you find you can certainly progress that. So, it's as I said, it has its ups and downs. Not all of it's plain sailing. Sometimes when you're trudging the streets, on a cold winter's evening, wet through, trying to deliver leaflets and updates to people, you sometimes question the reasons why you're doing it sometimes. But ultimately, it's for the greater good, as they say. So, I just hope I can continue doing that for people, and that's the reason why I'm really standing to continue what I've done for the last 20 odd years.
Thank you very much, Jason. Okay, so the same question, please, to Aimee.
Hi, I really did exactly the same thing in my introduction and already sort of stated why I'm standing. It was because I was working in the area at the time, and I have some connection with Stamshaw Junior. The children at the school have been answering some questions about running as a candidate and politics as well, and I'd like to work more in the schools there. When I consider some of the issues going on socially, a lot of these kinds of issues can be met quite early on. And so, I'm basically standing in the area because I feel an affinity to it. I've worked there, I've canvassed there for some time, and I think I would be a good candidate to run there.
Thank you very much, Aimee. And the same question, please, to Duncan.
As I mentioned, I'm a parent to 2 young children. When my children, to give a bit of background, a couple of years ago, my now 4-year-old was blue lighted 4 times to A&E with breathing problems exacerbated by air pollution. One of the scariest things I've ever seen as a parent is my child not being able to breathe. I want to make that difference for children and for everybody in the area. One of the biggest issues we have in Portsmouth is our air pollution. And I said, it scared me. And I thought, I've got to do something. I've got to stand up and be seen. I want to make that difference to everybody in the area for whatever needs they have. There is so much deprivation in the area. So many people need so many things. And as a Green, all I can do is try and help and try and make people.
Thank you very much, Duncan. And lastly, to Jason. To Spencer, please. Sorry.
So I've got quite a special connection to the ward. I've got lots of close friends and family in the ward, and I've been active with community work there for a number of years. I know the area well. And I think that my particular skill set can help the communities that make up the ward, from Stamshaw to Tipner to North End and Buckland. Each community is unique and got its own characteristics, but there's also similar issues that are pervasive across the wards and are impacting on residents, like antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, social housing problems and parking. I get a real buzz from helping the community here, and that's what motivates me. I'm hoping that I will be successful come the 5th of May to help me continue that work even further.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Just to check, just in case anybody does, would any candidate like to use their rebuttal time in this question? Okay, no problem. Didn't think so. Ian.
Yeah, so if we look specifically at the Nelson ward, again, when we look at some of the wards in the council, some are obvious, like Cosham, where Simon and I are based, but I guess many people might not understand what Nelson ward covers. So just to give us some insight, what do you see as the key issues in the Nelson ward? And can I ask that question first to Spencer, please?
So the issues are definitely parking, antisocial behaviour across the board, HMOs and complaints about HMOs and the pressure they're putting on local neighbourhoods in certain areas of the ward, and local neighbourhood crime. These issues have a huge impact on people's quality of life, and out on the doorsteps I am finding that there is a real frustration that people feel they're working hard and paying council tax, but these issues aren't being effectively tackled. Other issues people tell me about are accessing council services such as housing and related benefits, services and helps. And sometimes the service people receive from the council isn't consistent, with them being bounced around departments and pushed from pillar to post. I've stepped in a number of occasions to help with this, but that is certainly an aspect that needs to be improved upon. Some residents have also fed back to me about ongoing flooding issues, particularly about the Wilson Road area, where raw sewage is being brought up into their properties. They've been pushed between the council and water companies, often feeling that one's blaming the other, but they're not really getting anywhere. And I'm keen to find a solution for the residents in that area and take ownership of that issue. I regularly speak with the local policing teams about areas of concern in the ward. Nobody should feel unsafe being out and about in the ward. And it's particularly worrying that lots of residents avoid certain areas such as parks because they're worried about drug dealing and the behaviour that's taking place there. The Conservative budget amendment did include provision for CCTV and lighting, which would have made a real difference to the area, but disappointingly, that was voted down by the Lib Dems and Labour. And something else that I am hearing on a regular basis as well from residents across the ward in all areas on the doorstep is that they feel that their hard-earned money is being funneled into South Sea and the other safe seats in the south of the city by the Lib Dems, and communities that are perhaps in more need such of those seem to be missing out. And it's a real common issue, and the best way I would use to describe in terms of how the residents explain it to me is that they feel forgotten about, and that is something that I will be working hard to rectify.
Thank you, Spencer.
So just to explain, Ian, unfortunately I'd left myself on mute, so couldn't let Spencer know that he'd actually overrun a bit. So my apologies, Spencer, for not giving you any warning, and that's why that overrun. So my apologies.
No problem at all. So, in terms of the key issues facing the ward, Aimee, could you give us your perspective, please?
Yes, thank you. Definitely some of the things that Spencer's touched on. Antisocial behaviour is one that comes up regularly alongside the parking. The parking is kind of a longer term issue that's affecting everyone. But with the antisocial behaviour, there are key areas that I hear people talking about it quite a lot. So that's in Buckland, and it's not necessarily that it's always happening within Buckland, but areas sort of nearby that are really concerning them. And I know that Labour have worked to put more funding into wardens and working with them, and to champion funding wardens. And I think regarding up towards the north as well, recently there's been a lot of conversations in, I think it's the Stamshaw and Tipner action group, and also possibly in the North End group, lots of antisocial behaviour happening that's really worrying people. And we do have fantastic things going on in that ward, lots of youth provisions like Stamshore Youth. And further down, more the Buckland area, we've got Portsea youth clubs as well. But this seems to be really concerning people. And I think when I talk to them, I can remember going along a whole road and people were saying, you know, I don't feel safe. This isn't the community I remember before. And yet lots of people were saying that in an area, which means that you're living in an area with great people. And I'd really like to try and do more things to bring people together to make them feel safer. I am aware that parking is an ongoing issue, and I kind of have a question about this because a lot of people told me that they'd received a council survey asking their opinions, but they didn't know what the upshot of that was. And actually, I'm not clear either. So I would want to work to maybe try and produce a survey that is it's more clear to people what exactly can be done and what it is that they want. But I'd also be curious to know whether the incumbent councillor can shed light on that survey. I also have concerns regarding poverty, because I've seen a lot of that when I've talked to people in really desperate situations, and that is something that sits on my heart, has affected me, but is also something that the Labour Party really want to work with people on to just make living standards a lot more bearable. Thank you.
Thank you. And so finally, Jason, can you give us your insights into what the key issues are in Nelson?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, Aimee came and asked me sort of a question through that. I don't know whether you want me to respond to that in sort of rebuttal time or include it into what I'm going to say now, but I'm happy to use either, basically.
Do you want to, rather than use your time for your response, if there's if that, I think it's probably fairer,
Yep.
Ian, rather than Jason. So if you want to take some time to explain or whatever the process explanation is to that, and then we'll come to actually your answer to the question, if that helps. I think that's better.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, fine. I think what Amy's referring to is a survey that was conducted in Stampshire and Tipner. Basically, there is already a residence parking zone in the southern part of Stampshire. We surveyed, I think back in about 2012, if my memory serves me correctly. South Stampshire wanted it, North Stampshire at the time didn't want it, including Tipner. Since that time, obviously 10, 12 years down the line, pressures of vehicles and parking has grown, displacement, because you get displacement when you introduce a residence parking scheme, kicks into effect. So people notice it. So we had representations from people on exactly the same thing that Amy's heard from them, and we put out an informal survey via the council just to get people's opinions on whether they would support a formal consultation on residence parking. That's come back and that's been supported. So there will be a formal consultation to residents in Stampshire and Tipner. At the moment, PERDA process is in place, so we can't conduct any formal surveys as such. But yeah, just to reassure Aimee and any residents that are listening, there will be one, and it will take place obviously once the elections are finished. So regardless of who's the candidate is or the sitting council at that point, the survey will still take place. Okay, I hope that clarifies that one.
Thanks.
And if you want me now to come back on the original question, what are the key issues facing the ward? Well, they're very much the same as other issues that are key factors that are facing other areas across the city. I mean, Portsmouth, as I said earlier, is very condensed, so the problems that people encounter in Stampshire, North End, Buckland, etc., are often mirrored. Cohesion, Central South, the other wards across the city. I mean, a key issue clearly is Tipner West. We have a question on that later on. But I think what people find the frustration is when they come home and they're faced on a daily basis with a range of things. That could be difficulty in trying to find a place to park, finding rubbish dumped by people that can't give a damn where they leave it, juvenile nuisance and intimidation, as has been touched on already, difficulty in securing accommodation. All these things affect people on a daily basis. So when you come back from your daily job, wherever that may be, whatever you've been doing during the day, I mean, you're looking forward to some kind of relaxation within your own home. And unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. So a local authority is there, along with the councillors that are elected to serve it, basically to step in and be on hand when residents basically ask you for assistance. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I say the key issues are.
Thank you, Jason. So do any candidates wish to take advantage of their 1 minute rebuttal?
Ian, Duncan hasn't had a chance to answer that question yet.
Has he not?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I'm sure.
I'll take that as a yes. Yeah, no. In which case, Duncan, my huge apologies. I need to check my spreadsheet, but please, can you give us your insight into the key issues for Nelson?
Sure. Biggest key issues in the area seem to be, again, parking, antisocial behaviour, fly tipping, and again, air quality. Many of these seem to go in hand, air quality and parking, if they can be taken in such a way that people are able to cycle safer or access public transport to get to where they need to go. Maybe that would alleviate parking a little bit. Social behaviour, again, a big one. It's tackling the underlying need that we need to do, as well as, again, tackle the problems that antisocial behaviour causes. So with fly tipping, I know there's been a lot of issues recently, especially in like the North End area, with councillors having to work very hard to get it sorted out, which I know they have done. So there we go. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Duncan. Again, my apologies for messing up on the arrangements. So does anybody wish to use their 1 minute rebuttal?
No, they're all clear.
Marvellous. In which case, I shall hand you on to Simon and our next question.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, so our next question is, so with a massive demand for housing behind the rising existence of HMOs, are they meeting a clear need for housing where no other affordable alternatives exist? Or just another pressure on local services, parking and the cohesion of neighbourhoods? And what's your solution? And I'd like to ask that question first, please, to Duncan.
Hi, yeah. HMOs do pose a slight problem where lots of people are living in a small area, which then puts pressure on parking. There are approximately 1,000 empty properties in Portsmouth that have been empty for 6 months or more. Those really need to be brought back into use, which may help alleviate some of the problems with HMOs. With, again, going back to public transport, if we can get that right, we might be able to alleviate some of the problems with parking, where public transport then becomes a help to it and useful to people rather than not being of any use. I've noticed that over time, the public transport times in Portsmouth have increased, which can be a problem, which makes it less of an option for people. Certainly with a family, driving and using a car is cheaper than using public transport, so that needs to be cheaper as well. So again, many issues go hand in hand. If we can have enough social housing, that might alleviate the need for HMOs, bring up houses for family houses.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay, and the same question, please, to Jason.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I'd say the answer to the question is both. I mean, there is limited council and housing association stock out there, and individuals that apply for it obviously have to go through a criteria and assessment, and that results for some people in unfortunately a lengthy wait. Private landlords are perfectly entitled to offer up HMOs as they see fit, provided they meet with planning legislation. Then they can go ahead and open one up and rent them out. And of course, this can lead to pressures on local services. Difficulty as well is how responsible a landlord is. And a lot of the casework that we get, fortunately in the north, I'd say we don't suffer to the same degree that some of the wards in the south do. But you know, it does cause problem to people. And if you have a landlord that's not responsible, then unfortunately that's when the problems start to occur. I mean, we've got a significant student population in the city, again, primarily in the south rather than the north. But we're faced with national targets on our housing. 17,000 new homes we were set basically in our current plan, which I don't think is feasible, and we'll come on to that later on. And some people literally can't afford house prices. I mean, I'm a tenant myself. I couldn't afford to buy a property simply. I mean, my rent is far more expensive than it would be for a mortgage, but that's the reality. So some people have no choice but to rent, and HMOs certainly fill a market to some degree. And you look at this, how much the city's grown in numbers of population in the last 10 years. I think there's been an increase over 30,000 plus people coming in. So it is a very difficult subject to tackle. I'm sorry, I've overgone, but yeah.
No,
it
10 seconds left. Sorry.
Okay.
If you just want to draw your comment to a close, that's fine. Sorry, I interrupted you. So 10 seconds.
Okay, I'd virtually finished anyway. Just to say, it is a difficult issue to resolve, and I think cross-party working on that certainly is a bonus. So collectively amongst us, regardless of our political parties, then, you know, by working together certainly helps it. But yeah, HMOs certainly can be problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Sorry for throwing you off your flow there. Right. Okay. So the same question, please, to Spencer.
Thank you. Having heard Jason's response there, and from some of the conversations I've been having with local residents, I think they'll be a bit disappointed, really, in that response. Certainly not against HMO development, but we are very strongly against bad HMO development, which unfortunately there does seem to be a lot of, with it being unmanaged and getting through on the basis of policy loopholes and with little in the way of future accountability. Local services are stretched. The roads are full of cars. There's residents in one road in the ward that tell me that a HMO, a single property, has got 7 cars. And that's just placing pressure on top of pressure in terms of parking. There's a big impact on community cohesion, and actually the vast number of HMOs are actually starting to change the face of some neighbourhoods in the ward, where you once had family homes are now being replaced with multiple occupancy. Many of these properties tend to be inhabited by younger people, so there's also additional pressures in terms of noise and other issues that can be caused by some, certainly not all. Really pleased that following calls from councillors Dan Weems and Ben Swan, who have been really strong on this issue, the council are having a look again at the HMO policy, and that is much needed. It's just a shame it's taken so long to get to that point.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Okay, and then the same question, please, to Aimee.
Hi. Regarding HMOs, just last night I was out talking to somebody, and I was with Councillor Cal Corkery, who's worked quite hard in the planning area regarding HMOs. And I know that there has been a lot of cross-party teamwork among councillors to make sure that certainly the larger HMOs have to pass stringent criteria in regards to space, and that there can be no more than 10% of homes within a 50-metre radius that are an HMO. And I think this is why people are starting to see the HMOs pop up, but there is also a restriction on how many there can be. And I think the fear sometimes when I talk to people in communities is that they'll just be absolutely everywhere and there's no control. And I think the second part of what Labour have been trying to push for in local council, and I think would probably be agreed among other councillors, is that there are smaller HMOs which aren't so well regulated. They don't go through the process of going through the planning officers and then being licensed. And as coming from the Labour perspective, we would be really strict on these HMOs that are smaller, making sure they have to go through that second process, that the space is adequate there, that people aren't just being shoehorned into inadequate properties. And it is a difficult question because you've got a situation where you have some of these HMOs creating space which might take pressure off the amount of development that was desired in Tipner and other areas, but at the same time puts more pressure on the parking in an area. And I think that's where the consultation that the local council have done is going to be really valuable. And one thing I would say about HMOs also is that this system, where they're only allowed a certain amount, I think 10% within a 50-metre radius. Judith, one of the councillors in the south, told me that they practically get no HMO requests now for development in St Thomas's, because this has been upheld. The council have been really strong on making sure that HMOs aren't just everywhere, but they stick to this strict limit of space.
Thank you, Aimee. Anybody want to come back with any rebuttals to those responses at all?
Yeah, I'd like to, please.
Okay, Spencer.
Just
60-second
to, thank you. Just to pick up on the 17,000 figure that was raised by Jason, it's a shame there's been such delays with the local plan, and there's been clear indications given that if the Lib Dems were to go back and speak to central government, that figure could be looked at again, but for whatever reason, there does seem to be a reluctance on their part to do that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Spencer. Anyone else want to take up their rebuttal on that question?
Yeah, can I just come back? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Jason, your 60-second rebuttal?
Just in regard to HMOs, that's what originally the question was. Spencer saying that residents will be disappointed to hear what I've got to say. I mean, I'm sure residents will be disappointed when they're confronted with problematic HMOs. The difficulty is the council obviously has to adhere to legislation and to law. While there are current criteria for HMOs, you know, we have to abide by those. If we find an illegal HMO, then yes, we can take action. But the difficulty is, if it qualifies and goes through a process and a landlord is allowed to operate an HMO, there's very little apart from policing that we can actually do. A lot of the cases, yeah, you have to respond to problems that subsequently occur, but at the actual stage when it goes through, there's very little you can actually do if it meets the criteria that it's required to. So I'm not saying that HMOs aren't a problem. Goodness knows, as a councillor, I've had plenty of experience of them being problems, but we are bound by what we can and cannot do. So the issue about the 17,000 homes, these are targets that are put onto us by national government. I don't think we are happy with them. We must said we're happy with 17,000 homes. It's far too many. The difficulty is trying to come back with something that's not going to allow the government just to impose figures on us. So that's my response. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Right. Okay. So thank you very much. Any other rebuttals on that one at all from either Aimee or Duncan? Lovely. Thank you. Ian.
Yeah, more opportunities to discuss housing. Obviously, Tipner West was hailed as the development that was really going to contribute to that housing target, with 3,500 dwellings being built on there. It's now known as Lennox Point. It appears that the appetite for that development is declining. So we'd like to know the candidate's perspective on should it be built on, and if not there, then where? And can I ask that first to Aimee, please?
Hi. As it stands, that area, to my understanding, is still planned to be built on. However, I know that the Labour Council has pushed really hard to reduce the amount. So I think it's no longer 3,500. I can be corrected if I'm wrong. I don't know absolutely everything. And it's going to be significantly less. However, and the reason that the Labour councillors pushed hard for that and wanted to work with other councillors who felt the same was because it's such an area of natural beauty. It helps us resolve other issues such as maintaining biodiversity, which helps us deal with pollution and other concerns. It's also good for us to really protect the area that's below the I can't think what it's called, firing range. I went on a walk recently with David Allwright from Hampshire Wildlife Trust, Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, and he sort of explained how important it was to protect this point. I think this, more than anything, is what really concerns a lot of residents that I talk to. Labour have fought to say that they really want to stand by that as well and make sure that that area is protected, because when you set a precedent that it's okay to build on a protected area, then it starts making potentially land across the country up for grabs as well that shouldn't be. There is still plan for development there. However, there have been opportunities for residents to go and look at those plans, and also the RSPB and the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Trust have asked people to look at a survey that they're doing and to say exactly how they feel, what they think should be going on in that area, what should be developed, how it should work with nature. And I think if things were built elsewhere, the plan would be that we would look more centrally where there are already high rises and look to just make them a little bit higher. So we're still meeting that need for housing, but in an area where we already have a high rise, taking the pressure off Tipner West.
Thank you, Aimee. Can I ask the same question to Duncan? Lennox Point, Tipner West, should it be built on? And if not, where?
Hi, yeah, I've actually been working with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust and a group of residents on shit. I'll echo what Aimee said. It is the idea of Lennox Point was to build on legal land, which is a complete no-no. It's stupendous that it would open such a door for developers countrywide. Legislation that was going to be used was being used for high-speed rail links, just for housing. I know there's been a new idea put up, but it still builds on legal protected land. Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust have put up an ideal what should be there that does not build on this land. The problem with the firing range is that it's used by brent geese as a secondary source of food, which muddies the matters a little bit. I know ideally that should still be protected. What else could we build? Think about the Northern Quarter. That could be an amazing opportunity to build another very brownfield site. If you look around North End as well, the abandoned buildings, which are a source of antisocial behaviour, maybe they could be brought into local control and developed for social housing, which then also may help with the antisocial behaviour, for example. So again, like the Isle of Wight have tried challenging the number of houses built, we perhaps should be doing the same, or looking at doing that, just saying this is too already crowded city, it's putting too much burden on our infrastructure.
So you had 10 seconds left. Sorry, I've interrupted you, Duncan. Did you want to finish up your remarks? Sorry. You're still on mute.
No problem. If there's nothing you want to come back on, then Spencer, then I will. Sorry, Duncan.
Duncan's just trying to struggle with his getting his microphone off, I think.
No problem. In which case, I shall wait for a moment.
Just give him a second to try and sort that out. Yeah, sorry, he's messaged in the chat that he's going to leave his remarks there.
Perfect.
Right. Okay.
So the same question, Lennox Point, Tipner West. Should we be building on it? And can I ask that question to Spencer, please?
So Duncan touched upon there the proposals that have been put forward by Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. I think their preference is that the site is left alone. But what they have suggested is if the development was to go ahead, it could be done more sensitively, and they've set out a proposal for how that could take place. And we do need affordable homes and social housing. So I am broadly supportive of development. It's vital that it's the right sort of development, and also that it's supported by the right infrastructures, GPs, an adequate road and an adequate road system. What isn't acceptable is the pie in the sky proposals that had been rammed through. I think something like £20 million of taxpayers' money has been spent on the site, and there's nothing to show for it. The super peninsula idea was mad and completely balmy to suggest that protected land on the harbour should be built on. So I am broadly supportive of development in that area, but it needs to be the right type of development.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. And on to, finally for that question, Jason, can you give us your perspective, please?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I hope viewers this evening are familiar with Tipner. The area that we're talking about is the former Greyhound Stadium, industrial land that you've got over there. And there's been various proposals going on for this for donkey's years. Before I became a councillor in '95, this was an issue, and it's still an issue. Here we are in 2022. I mean, I've lost track, to be honest, of the number of meetings that I've been to over the years, a number of proposals that I've seen. And to be honest, residents are quite rightly cynical. The latest scheme we've got is Vivid. Whether that has any more success, we'll have to see. Time will tell on that one. Personally, would I like to see it built on? No, actually, I wouldn't. I'd like it to be sort of preserved. Well, I say preserved. I'd like it to be made of some kind of green area, allowing accessibility, green spaces. Precious few of that in the city as it stands at the moment. But the difficulty is that we are required to produce housing. We are a local authority, and we are told we have to create additional homes for people to live in, and that's where it comes to the crunch. There was a proposal for 3,500 at this particular site. Plans weren't agreed. At the moment, I don't know what the outcome will be on it. We'll have to see. The problem you've got is if we don't build, where do we build in the city? If we don't build at Tipner, where do we go to? Cosham? Do we go to more high rises in Landport, Somerstown? That's the problem. Portsmouth's the most condensed city in the UK, and we just don't have we don't have an infinite amount of space. So it's again, like so many of these questions, it's a difficult one to tackle. We have to go into dialogue, and I'm glad that other candidates here have been speaking to other organisations that have got an interest in it. But ultimately, it needs to come down to consultation with local residents. They've had the opportunity to do that in regards to Tipner, seeing the proposals, the latest set of proposals. But yeah, 17,000 new homes, let me make it clear, from the perspective of myself and my own group, and so it seemed other parties across the council, is simply not a feasible figure. It's too many. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So I'd like to invite, are there any candidates who would like to use their rebuttal time?
I would, if I may, please.
Go ahead.
Just to repeat my earlier comments, really, it's interesting that 17,000 figure has come up again, and I don't think that should be used as a distraction to what was really a poor proposal. I wasn't quite clear from Jason's response at the time. Did he support or did he object to the proposal that was put forward by the Lib Dems at the time for the 3,500 houses and the land reclamation on a protected site?
Jason, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, I gave you my personal feelings on it, but my personal feelings, I didn't win the argument when we discussed it, so I took and went along with the decision of my group. And again, speaking to residents, feelings are mixed, as you'd expect. Sorry? Okay.
I don't know what happened there. Sorry, Jason, carry on.
All right, okay, sorry. There's mixed feelings towards it, particularly the people that live in the immediate area that are likely to be affected by it. So in answer to Spencer's question, I hope I've answered it there. Personally, I'd like it not to be developed, but realistically, it's going to be developed at some point, and we have to accommodate new homes. So, you know, that's a site of land that's been identified for building, and so it's just a case of actually getting into agreement what actually can go in place there. And yeah, the proposals were thrown out at full council, so we're looking at what we can do from now.
Thank you. So either Aimee or Duncan, would you like to come in there at all?
This could be an opportunity for like a very good vision for green housing. The consensus to be to have a smaller development there rather than so many houses. Would have to be agreed, and a green lead might be a way. We could be a groundbreaking community in the area based on green housing, for example.
Thank you, Duncan. I don't want you to feel you've missed out, Aimee, so I'll give you one last chance.
Oh, am I on? Yeah, I was actually, you just jogged my memory, Duncan, when you said that. I do remember when I went on the Wildlife Trust walk. That was something that David Warwick was talking about a lot, just saying we'd really like people to give their opinion about how they want this to look and what their vision is, because potentially there's so much scope for local input to say how these properties can be greener, how they can somehow kind of blend in with the wildlife that's already there. A lot of people that I was listening to who were just talking, and they were, I guess, mostly local residents, were talking about whether there were opportunities for educational things to be there as well. So there is this bridge between there being a development there, but also an appreciation of what's been taken to do that, and also the greenery and the nature and the ecosystems there. And I think also a big thing about this development that Labour is really keen on is making sure that we have really good links this time, getting backwards and forwards, sort of back into Stamshaw and the main roads as well. So there are good cycle paths.
And that's time on that one.
Sorry.
So thank you all for answering that very comprehensively. And I will now throw to Simon.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. So our next question is, so the North End shopping area has seen many shops come and go over the last couple of decades. What should be done to revitalise shopping centres like North End for the 21st century? And I'd like to put that question first, please, to Spencer.
Thank you. So shopping's changed massively over the past 20 years, and even more so over the past couple of years with the COVID pandemic. Online retailers are now king. Visiting the high street is now no longer essential. So the council and businesses need to find ways of attracting consumers. Residents, particularly older residents, have raised concerns with me about the lack of banking facilities in North End and the need to travel out of the area to access that. It's a shame that the current administration missed a real trick a couple of years ago when they made their bid for the government's Future High Street Fund. £7 million was eventually granted, but unfortunately they decided to concentrate on two high street areas in the south of the city rather than the north. I know Penny Mordaunt MP challenged the Lib Dems on that at the time, but I think that was a real lost opportunity there. It's not all doom and gloom, as there is a move towards more leisure and social activities with coffee shops. I'm personally a particular fan of the escape room on London Road, exciting escapes. So there are some positives there, but to be successful, that area is going to need to be a place where people want to go. And at the moment, there are issues with graffiti and littering, and to attract people into that area, it's going to need to look its best. So I'd certainly be working towards looking to get on top of those issues.
Thank you, Spencer. And that same question, please, to Jason.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the difficulty that we've got is the change in people's habits towards shopping. There are a number of factors to it, and Spencer's touched on some of those already. I don't wish to duplicate. But if you look at the increase in online sales, that was exacerbated to some degree by the pandemic that's dragged on, that we're now sort of gradually emerging from. But smaller shopping centres, you know, not just in Portsmouth, but in cities across the UK, towns across the UK, are suffering. There's no doubt to that. You've got to look at, let's say, the pandemic. You look at austerity cuts. You look at rises in living costs, provision to businesses there, in fuel costs, transport costs. I mean, they all take their tolls, and you know, we've seen that in North End. That it's true to say it's been in decline for a number of years. The traders' associations that used to be fairly vibrant now, I've seen them disappear over the years. And so we can try and do things as a local authority. Clearly, we're limited in what we can do, but myself and my colleagues undertook a tour around North End towards the latter part of last year, looking at measures that we can bring in, and if there are going to be some changes to the 3 alleyways that are in North End, looking at bringing a water feature, for example, into by Lidl's at central part of North End there. So there are bits you can do to try and tidy the area up. In regards to the graffiti, fly tipping, which is a problem, particularly in Ashling Lane. There's a graffiti squad the council's got that will tackle graffiti. We regularly have to deal with fly tipping. The difficulty is when you remove it, somebody else chooses to dump it back on site again. One of the reasons why we've picked up on a mobile CCTV camera just for Nelson to try and catch the culprits, basically. So yeah, it's a big question to try and deal with rejuvenating smaller shopping areas, and we are trying, but there's always more that we can do.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jason. That was precisely to time, so well done. Thank you. And the same question, please, to Aimee.
Hi. Yeah, with the huge changes to the way people are choosing to shop, which the others have already touched on, I think my kind of thought about this area is, or these areas, is that a lot of what aggrieves people is not only the fly tipping, which is really frustrating, and like the fumes and things like that in the area, but is often just seeing properties that are empty, shops that look a mess and aren't being used properly. And there are things in the area, the name escapes me, but I think it might be called the Learning Zone, in that area, where you've got a building that is being purposed really well. And also down in Fratton, I think they have something called Made, where there's a building which has a cafe and arts and crafts and sort of like a charity shop area. And it's being run by volunteers. And it's just a really powerful thing in the community. And I think that there are a few things that we could look to do outside of just making it tidier immediately, is seeing if we can repurpose some buildings that aren't being used. If they're not going to become shops, can they be something that's more community orientated? Is it possible to make some of these into housing that is still attractive and keeping with the area? And also, I was there more recently, and I was with Portsmouth Friends of the Earth, and they were just on Derby Road, in front of the spa, and they were doing lots of greening, which also the Wilder Corner work on. I think it is possible to make people feel more proud of where they live, and to make areas like that greener, and to keep encouraging the green agenda that I think all of us want for Portsmouth, really. It's been touched on by nearly every person that's spoken this evening, that there are opportunities to make the areas we live more beautiful. There's been a strategy by, it wasn't just Charlotte, but Charlotte Gerarda, but I know that she held a forum where people could talk about cycling, because a lot of the cycling lanes around the area are great. And I think if we can also encourage better pathways, then that whole that whole area could just be not just somewhere that we go and shop, but somewhere that we can make more beautiful, we can make greener, and we can make somewhere that we cycle more, so that people feel proud of the area.
Thank you very much. And then the same question, please, to Duncan.
Hi, the lockdown seems to have exacerbated the problems of the high street area. For example, the company I bank with reduced their hours to such an extent that as a working adult, I can access at the bank in the area, which previously shut down, which therefore means I've got to make more journeys to the south of the city to do the same things. So bringing a bank and banks into North End would be really helpful. However, doing that would be quite difficult. We do need to green the area more. It's one of the most dry areas of the city. There's no green cover. So providing green cover would be amazing as well. So bringing back what people need into the area would be really helpful, because then that would also reduce the number of journeys people make to other parts of the city. So we sort of do need to work together to revitalise the North End High Street. It is also a very busy high street. I've nearly been hit several times as a cyclist as I cycle through the daily basis to and from work. So yeah, very busy there, especially at rush hours, which can make it quite dangerous for people to do. Also working in the area, I've noticed that one side of the road has got bins, but the other hasn't, which will then add to the littering as people can't be bothered to cross the road or take their litter with them. So extra bins in the area might be handy, for example. Bringing in maybe some of the housing department up into North End might be helpful as well. As an example of what we could do, maybe.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Right, thank you very much all. If I can just see whether anybody needs to make use of their rebuttal at this time, can I just implore on you all to try to keep to time if you can. I'll start calling out actually earlier in the last 30 seconds of your sections. Perhaps that'll give you a bit more of a comfortable time limit to wind your remarks to a close. But does anybody want a rebuttal on that one at all?
Can I just come back to a point that Aimee made, if that's okay?
Can I just come to, because I told Jason just raise his hand first, so if I can just come to Jason and back to you, Spencer, if that's all right.
Yeah, thanks. It wasn't a point that Aimee made, not to disagree with her, but basically to try and clarify. I think it's sensible what she's suggesting in regards to trying to use some of the empty properties. Difficulty, the buildings are obviously owned by different individuals, different companies and such, like some in Portsmouth, some outside of Portsmouth. And the problem is, you know, short of trying to push a compulsory purchase through on them, which is probably very unlikely, it's up to them what they choose to do with it. Yes, we'd like to see them back in use again, but if someone chooses to close a business for whatever reason, or is forced to close a business, then, you know, there's not a great deal we can do there. HGV bans, we brought that in some years ago to try and limit the number of vehicles thundering through North End. There is some seal money available for the ward, about 112,000, I think, the latest count. But that's relatively small when you look at what it's trying to address. But yeah, there's certainly things that we can do, and we try. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And you wanted to make a rebuttal, Spencer?
Yeah, just to come back to the point Aimee made about the scheme that Councillor Charlotte Gerardo was involved in. That was along with George Fielding as well, and local businesses in Albroad Highland Road. I know also the Conservative councillors in Cosham have been actively working on not dissimilar schemes, and Cosham High Street really is quite bustling, and I've spoken to them about some ideas for North End. I think it is a shame that there does seem to be a lack of ideas from the Lib Dem councillor team in Nelson.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. Okay, so did Duncan or Aimee, are you happy not taking your rebuttals on that question? You're all right. Lovely, thank you. Ian?
Yes, with the cost of living rising sharply, what more do we think the council should be or could be doing for helping those that are not just about managing anymore? And can I put that first to yourself, Jason?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I took some time before this to look at what the what the council actually does in regards to assisting people in a variety of situations. There is, I mean, I'm not going to read it out to you, but there's a 13-page document on the council website which lists, basically under the heading Help for People in Financial Hardship, which lists a whole range of organisations and support that you can get for the council to promote where people can turn to in regards to seeking benefits, seeking assistance with housing, and I say a whole range of other options. That's primarily one of the greatest things they can do to lead people and steer people into the right direction and assist them. Again, clearly a local authority can only do so much. Central government assistance is something that we would welcome. Councils are hardly awash with money. Year after year, we face cuts under whatever administration we've had, both locally and nationally. So, and where we currently are today, with so many demands, we're seeing huge fuel increases, energy costs going up, the repercussions from what's happening in the Ukraine, the results of what's happened through the pandemic. I mean, again, consumers, residents, we take hit after hit after hit, and it's clearly at the stage now where food banks are at record numbers, and people are finding it very difficult to survive. And how often do we hear the phrase, you know, do we eat or do we have heat? You know, that's the reality of what we're in. So for a local authority,
25
yes. Oh, sorry, I'm running out of time.
25
So yes, that's 25 cents. Okay, thank you. Clearly involving other organisations that exist locally and nationally too, those that specifically are there to help those in need. The council works closely with those, and I'm sure
10 seconds.
ward councillors do it. Okay, sorry, I'm out of time.
Thank you, Jason. And could I ask that question, please, to Spencer?
So it's not just a council issue. Ultimately, this is a much higher up issue. I've been following this week that the government has held its first cost of living cabinet to try and fast track more ideas. That's on top of what we've already seen. But yes, there are huge global issues that are putting pressure on the rising cost of living, whether that's issues in Ukraine, the demand for more oil as the economies across the world recover following the COVID shutdown. Pleased to see this week that council tax rebates of £150 have been going straight back into people's bank accounts. Councils are required, and for those that aren't paying by direct debit, to get in contact with them to pay those monies back. And I certainly would encourage any residents that haven't got direct debit set up, so won't get those monies immediately back into their bank accounts, to keep an eye and follow up if those monies aren't received back by them. Locally, Penny Mordaunt MP is funding new food pantries with the proceeds from her book. There's quite a lot going on locally. Maybe we do need to look at a council-based resource or website to tie all of that together. And there is a very good tool on Penny's website that does set out some of the help that's available. So there is a resource there as well for Nelson residents. And finally, it's important as well, I think, that the council is run efficiently, so there can be downward pressure on council tax also.
15 seconds.
Thank you, Spencer. And Duncan, what more do you think the council should be doing for those who are struggling with the cost of living?
Many people are struggling with cost of living. According to the National Education Union, nearly 7,000 children across Portsmouth North live in poverty. That equates to 1 in 3 children in our ward, as an average across the Portsmouth North. This figure is pre-cost of living rising. So therefore, as a result, more children are going to be in need, more families are going to be in need, more people are going to be in need of help. £150 is really helpful for a lot of families. For example, I know recently that Portsmouth City Council provided free school meals to all those entitled. Maybe we should be considering free school meals to all children in primary, just to help families out a little bit, or extending the scheme to summer holidays as well. This would help perhaps families. As for everyone else, we need to make sure that the council is run as efficiently as possible. Go back to my Conservative colleague saying this will really help with the downward pressure in council tax. It is a global issue. More needs to be done nationally for it, as well as locally. We need to do our best to help people as much as we can. We need to reduce our costs. Again, that's very difficult given all the problems facing the city.
Thank you. And can I ask that question as well, please, to Aimee?
Yes. My fellow colleagues here, I mean, you have touched on some things that I might have said. So one thing I'll mention is that the local Labour councillors have been pushing for a foundation living wage for making sure that all those who are working in public services, including those that are contracted out organisations, that people are being paid well. And I think this is, given so many people that I come across in the ward who are working public services, I think this is another way that we can support people. It's not the only one. I mean, there are a number of things that you guys have said that I would agree with. So I'm not going to add too much more to this. I just think we need to keep signposting people to places that they can get food if they need it, and continue work that is happening. But I mean, this situation of austerity has been going on for 10 years. We've had food banks for 10 years. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a lot of pressure. That's it.
My apologies. Sorry, Ian. I've now unmuted you. Sorry.
No problem at all. So would anybody like to use their rebuttal on that question, please? On to yourself, Simon.
Okay, lovely. So, so our next question is the subject of antisocial behaviour comes up regularly across the city. What do you believe is the root cause, and what more needs to be done to tackle it? And I put that question first, please, to Duncan.
Hi. Yeah. Antisocial behaviour is, again, a wide area. We have drugs and alcohol problems which need to be addressed. Those with addictions need help, not criminalisation. So we need to make sure these with addictions get the help they need to try and break that. For teens, we need to work with the teens themselves to provide them with something they want to do. I know the Children's Society recommend that teens and young adults and children are engaged in their community. This may help overcome antisocial behaviour when their views are taken into account. Maybe we can solve the problem that way rather than try and push the problem somewhere else. It might well be a whole city approach rather than just a Nelson thing. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Duncan. And I'd like to put the same question, please, to Aimee.
Yeah, I would agree with things that Duncan just said. That, sorry, things keep popping up on my screen. This is something that just needs to be dealt with really young. I know that people sort of worry about where different criminals or antisocial behaviour is coming from, but I think that there are so many great provisions that we have available. There's excuse me. My feeling is we just have a problem where there are lots of people who are really, really struggling really early on. And I think if families can get support they need through things like Sure Start programs, Home Start, places like the Roberts Centre, this is invaluable, and we need to keep putting money in at a really early age. where we know that there is mass poverty, and as Duncan said, 1 in 3 children is living in a household that's considered to be in poverty. Maybe we do need to see if there is more funding to support food, like access to food in schools, and hot meals, and just ways to really give parents or guardians the support they need early on. Because it is a cyclical thing that goes round and round. We don't always find where people are poor. There's also antisocial behaviour, but we can give people a really good start. I've worked in youth engagement and education for absolute years and seen massive changes among young people who are engaged with. And I think, as well as the great facilities we have in the youth clubs, we do need to try and get them engaged in their community to see other things that they can be involved with.
Thank you very much. Okay, and the same question, please, to Jason.
Thanks. I mean, the question is, what's the specific route? There is no specific route to it. It's a combination of factors that stretches across a whole range of issues. I mean, juvenile gangs spring to mind, but you take into account fly tipping, you take into account dog fouling, you take into account all sorts of things that basically impact on people's daily lives. And there are reasons why that happens. People think they can make a quick buck by selling drugs. People think it's funny to smash off people's wing mirrors off their cars. Can't be bothered to pick up after their dog. So it is an educational factor. And I think if I go back and use what might be surprising, Blair's government, when he portrayed education as being a key factor in trying to make people's awareness of various issues, and that's a good one to go to. But I think it's fundamentally boils down to people understanding and taking accountability for themselves, knowing what's the difference between right and wrong. As a local authority, yeah, of course you can take steps. We have a community wardens team. We have a CCTV system that's pretty impressive. We have now in Nelson, thanks to us as local councillors, the only mobile CCTV for a ward in the city. Again, primarily to look at antisocial behaviour and dealing with it. You think my colleagues, if they're successful and they're elected, they'll find that becoming a councillor, one of the major things you'll deal with is antisocial behaviour on a fairly regular, ongoing basis. The police are the main factor for dealing with it, but you try and cooperate with the police, raise stuff to their awareness, and as residents feedback to councillors and council officers of where you got problems, then that's when you need to tackle and react to it. So things are being done, but it's a situation that plagues us all, but we are certainly working to tackle it, and I think we're having some impact, but not enough.
Thank you, Jason. And last but not least, Spencer, please.
So, yeah, this is a complex issue, and it varies, I think, across different areas of the ward. Issues such as social opportunities, social demographics, drugs and alcohol, lack of opportunities. We all want to see the end of this, but that's only going to come when the tools are there to do it. I think there is a lack of community wardens tackling these issues. Residents often comment to me there's never a shortage of parking wardens, but there does seem to be a shortage of community wardens. I think there's a role also for community responsibility. Donna Jones, the Police and Crime Commissioner, is getting tough on these issues, which is really welcome. And she's a big proponent of the community's role in assisting the police and reporting issues and information they might have to help aid the police in their job. I agree with all of the comments in terms of engaging perpetrators and giving people a way out of crime, but at the same time, I think we really need to be careful not to make excuses for criminal behaviour. And actually, while people should be given an opportunity where they don't take it, we need to have proper deterrence and proper sentencing and punishment for offenders that persist with this type of behaviour and really make a life misery for others.
Thank you very much, Spencer. So did anybody want to make use of their rebuttal on that one at all? Okay, thank you very much. So as we are running quite closely out of time, what I would suggest is that we limit the answers on the next question to 60 seconds, please, in order to be able to at least get this one last question in. So over to you, Ian.
Yeah, so in the Nelson world, the council infrastructure levy, which is the money that comes from development, there's 100k, I believe, in the pot for Nelson.
Ian,
So
sorry,
the
have I
question,
sent you the wrong questions? This was the one about the air quality being next to the M275 in the ferry port. Have I sent you the wrong document?
okay, I have lost the plot. Do you want to just take the question and run with it then? Save
All
me
right.
trying to.
Sorry, my mistake. So with Nelson being right next to the M275 and the international ferry port, what can be done to improve the air quality for Nelson residents? So our apologies for the confusion there. And can I put that question first, please, to Jason?
Yeah, a great deal can be done, and a great deal is being done. I think you touched on several factors. The ferry port obviously is a major employer there, and a great boon to the local authority. I think it's the only local authority owned ferry port in the UK. The steps that they're taking in regards to becoming carbon neutral by 2030, readily available to see either on the website, pick up plenty of information on that. And the ships that obviously use it, there's a change obviously because there's legislation on them as well to improve. You've got the clean air zone that's been introduced in Portsmouth, again introduced by government, as it will be to all local authorities. So that's trying to. I think over 50% of our air pollution is caused by vehicles. We have created a cabinet change climate post as a portfolio holder, a specific council officer that's come in to take over. And the good news to Crevit is we've won over £54 million from central government for a transformation of the bus service in Portsmouth. Not enough time for me to touch on what it is, but go to the council website and you can see this is a significant move for Portsmouth in the way that the buses and the infrastructure for public transport will work. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. That's time. And my apologies for having to shorten that one. And the same question, please, to Aimee.
Yeah, I think there are things that can be done. I mean, already the port has done quite a lot to reduce its carbon footprint. It runs largely on solar panels, but also one of my colleagues, Councillor Judith Smith, she has been working to get shore power there so that when we have ships coming in, they're able to turn off their engines and stay there. And I think this would make a big difference to the area. I think also we can just look at, maybe it's smaller, but things that we can do in terms of just greening the areas that we have, looking at projects like Living Streets, which are already doing really well down in the south, and in some of the southern areas. There are things that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aimee. And the same question, please, to Duncan.
I consulted a marine engineer friend of mine. The ships in the port, it would be a great idea to have them be able to hook up to shoreside power as soon as possible, very quickly. And that would save 40% of air pollution in the Rugby roundabout area. The clean air zone is too small. As I said, my son and myself are both asthmatic, exacerbated by air pollution. The original clean air zone was to include Kingston Crescent, Kingston Road, Fratton Road, and some other areas. That needs to be expanded to include those. These are areas that affect people's health massively. My colleague Tim Sherman Chase has been campaigning on this for as long as I've known him. Yeah, so Living Streets would be a great idea. But again, the roads need to be clearer and safer for people to move around and children to school. So a lot can be done. A lot more needs to be done to protect people's health. This would then reduce the burden on the NHS, on Queen Alexandra Hospital.
That's time.
These are things we can do.
Thank you, Duncan. And lastly, to Spencer, please.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. Absolutely, international ferry port is great. It's going to be a huge part of the city's future. It's really pleasing to hear Jason speaking so positively about those Conservative-led initiatives of the clear air zone and that huge £48 million investment from the government nationally into the bus service in Portsmouth, which is going to help reduce pollution in the city. I'm a bit more cautious in terms of expanding the clear air zone, and that needs to be the clean air zone, and that needs to be looked at quite carefully, because we need to be careful of any unforeseen consequences in terms of additional costs for people, for example, getting taxis or dissuading HGVs delivering goods that we all need, and possibly adding additional costs for people in the city. So that needs to be looked at carefully.
Thank you, Spencer. That's time. Was there anybody that was absolutely desperate to have a rebuttal on that one? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Being an excellent answer at this point. So thank you to all the candidates. Thank you for giving us such very comprehensive answers. We now need to invite you to make your closing addresses. You have 60 seconds, but obviously if you can keep it concise as to why the good people of Portsmouth should be voting for you on May the 5th. And can I ask that first to Aimee, please?
Hi, yeah, I think that people should consider voting for me because I work in healthcare. I've worked in education for years. A lot of the concerns that people have with antisocial behaviour are things that I have experience with, and also I have a real kind of empathy and experience of growing up in an area of poverty and facing a lot of the struggles that people have here. I think it's been probably a while since we've had Labour in the area, so it is quite good to mix things up. And I'm an extremely kind of diligent, conscientious person. I research things carefully, and I've had a relatively short time to actually get to go out in the ward, but I've learned a great deal already. So, yeah, and we have a massively green agenda. I'm really passionate about that kind of thing, and Labour are very focused on trying to green the area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Aimee. So Spencer, could we have your closing address, please?
So as you've heard earlier from me, I've already delivered some really good outcomes for the residents in the ward, and I hope to get your vote on the 5th of May to help support me continuing to do that. I've got fresh ideas and enthusiasm. As a representative for Nelson, I'd be active, visible across the ward, in close contact with residents and the council that they deserve. Your priorities are my priorities. This is the final hustings of the year, so I'd just like, on behalf of myself and my Conservative colleagues, to thank you, Ian and Simon, for the time you've put into producing the podcast and getting everybody involved.
Thank you, sir. We would let you have an extra few seconds for that one, but
should have mentioned it earlier. Thank you.
No worries. Could I invite you, Jason, to make your closing remarks, please?
Yeah, again, my thanks for organising it, and thanks to the people that have taken the time to watch it. I was born in the ward. I live in the ward. As I say, I've represented the ward for 23 years out of the last 27. In regards to visibility, well, I'm visible in the ward every day. I'm living it, and quite often myself, Councillor Madden, Councillor Hunt, we'll bump into residents through when we're delivering whatever we're doing. And a benefit of having represented people for such a long period of time is that we know a considerable number of them. I can only ask them, you know, you've had experience with me over 23 years. If you like what you've seen, then I hope you will continue to endorse me so I can continue to represent me. To my fellow candidates, I wish you all good luck. Maybe not quite the best of luck, but I hope you all come join second. But thank you anyway. So I offer myself up to the electorate and hope that they'll support me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And last but by no means least, Duncan, can we have your closing remarks, please?
Yeah, I live and I work in the ward. I have worked in the ward for years. Port's a great place to live. Nelson, I love working here. I love living here. My children love using the parks here. I want to see a greener Portsmouth, and I am the Green candidate for Nelson. So many issues need to be tackled, and I believe I will do my best to help people tackle the needs they have and achieve their best.
Perfect. Duncan, thank you very much. So thank you to all of the candidates And yeah, Simon and I would like to wish you all the best for the rest of your campaign. Simon, anything to add?
So just to reiterate that this is our last hustings of the season, but thank you very much for all of our candidates today, and indeed all of the candidates from the other parties that have attended the other hustings, and indeed the candidates that had said they were available for other wards, but where sadly we couldn't get at least one other candidate in their ward to agree a hustings date with us. Please do join us at 6:27 on Sunday, where Ian and I will be predicting the outcome of next Thursday's vote. And then the following Sunday, we'll be getting together to discuss how horrendously wrong we were. So do feel free to join us at 6:27 this Sunday. But thank you very much.
You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests have been Aimee Gwyther, the Labour candidate for Nelson, Jason Fazackarley, the Lib Dem candidate for Nelson, Spencer Gardner, the Conservative candidate, and Duncan Robinson, the Green candidate. And I've been Simon Sainsbury.